Chapter 29 of J.S. Bach, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. J.S. Bach, Volume 2 by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman. The Cantatas of the years 1728 to 1734, continued. The cantata Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme, number 140, deals with the parable of the 10 virgins, the Gospel for the 27th Sunday after Trinity. This Sunday comes into the church year only when Easter falls very early. As a rule, there are only 26 Sundays after Trinity. The first chorus depicts the awakening. All is animation, the bridegroom comes. The virgins start up in dismay from their slumber, one raising the other. In this chorus we can see very clearly the changes that have come over our conception of Bach's music. Julius Stockhausen of Frankfurt used to bring in the orchestra pianissimo and work it up through a slow crescendo as if distant noises were gradually coming nearer. Siegfried Ochs begins forte and with a very quick tempo so as to suggest the sudden confusion caused by the Wachet auf, awake. This is certainly the right way. To get the proper effect, the syncopated notes in the mounting semiquaver passages should be thrown into high relief. There need be hardly any fear of overdoing it. The more vehement the accents, the more clearly will the hearer apprehend the meaning of the motive. Footnote. Spitta, Volume 2, page 460, thinks that the semiquaver motive expresses a feeling of mysterious bliss that overflows again and again in happy and expressive passages. End of footnote. The second verse, Zion hört die Wächter singen, Zion hears the watchman singing, is dominated by a simple dance melody. With this, the chorale melody is combined dissonantly, as if it had nothing to do with it. The cry of a watchman strikes into the music of a procession that is drawing nigh with a bridegroom. In order that this may have its proper rural quality, it is written for the strings unisono with an accompaniment in the contrabasses. Footnote. Of course, the organ harmonies must be filled in. The chorale should be sung by several tenors, not a soloist. The text is, Zion hears the watchmen singing. According to Spitta, the mystical tone of the cantata here finds its fullest expression. He thinks it is like the dance of the souls in bliss. End of footnote. The procession arrives. In the festive hall the Gloria sei dir gesungen, glory now to thee be given, is sung. The foolish virgins are left outside in the night in despair. Not until Berlioz shall we meet with any dramatic pictorial music comparable to this. The middle verse of a chorale is framed between two mystical dialogues between Jesus and the soul. The consummate quality of these seems to point, like the contemplative parts of a cantata Ein feste Burg, to an origin in the Weimar period. These two cantatas taught Bach the advantage of short chorales for the composition of chorale cantatas. The idea now occurred to him to compile a chorale text out of characteristic stanzas from various hymns, and in the cantata Christus, der ist mein Leben, number 95, footnote, for the 16th Sunday after Trinity, end of footnote, to employ chorales that express different aspects of death. The first of these, Christus, der ist mein Leben, sterben ist mein Gewinn, speaks of lassitude of death. The orchestra accompanies it with a melancholy funeral lullaby, in which is interwoven a figure expressive of deep longing. A recitative, mit Freuden will ich von hinnen scheiden, with joy I will depart, during which the lullaby dies away, leads into the chorale, mit Fried und Freud fahr ich dahin, with joy and peace I go thither, in which the melody confidently wends its way above the quietly moving quavers in the bass. Then the sopranos. Footnote, it is quite wrong to give the cantus firmus to a soloist who cannot make herself heard above all the oboes and violins, end of footnote, sing the joyous hymn of parting from the world. Valet will ich dir geben, farewell do I bid thee, the oboes accompanying it with a joy motive of almost excessive exuberance. The figures in the basses symbolize the Hinauf steht mein Begier, my longing is for heaven. The same joyous mood in the face of death is expressed in the splendid tenor aria Ach, schlage doch bald, sel'ge Stunde. Ah, strike soon, thou blessed hour. The pizzicato of the strings giving a wonderful effect of distant bells. Bach's careful marking of the nuances here should be especially noted. This beautiful cantata, with its simple choruses, is very seldom performed, for which Spitta's unjust estimate of it is probably answerable, though perhaps the extraordinary technical demands that the tenor aria makes on the singer may have something to do with it. For the festival of the delivery of the Augsburg Confession, which was lavishly celebrated in the Leipzig churches on the 25th, 26th, and 27th June, Bach did not write any new cantatas. He had recourse to the New Year cantata of 1724, Singet dem Herrn ein neues Lied, No. 190, and the two Ratswahl cantatas, Gott man lobt dich in der Stille, No. 120. Footnote: this cantata is partly identical with the morning cantatas Herrgott beherrscher aller Dinge, Bachgesellschaft, 13. The chorus Jauchzet ihr erfreuten Stimmen, with its clear-cut motive of joy, is particularly beautiful. End of footnote. And Wünscht Jerusalem Glück. The latter is lost. This was the time of Bach's conflict with the council. Perhaps the disgusted frame of mind he was in accounts for him not having written a new work for the festival. He thus did not contribute any musical celebration to the two centenary feasts of the Reformed Church that came during his lifetime. On the occasion of the bicentenary of the beginning of the Reformation, 31st October 1717, he had been in disgrace with the Duke of Weimar, and so the composition of a festival cantata had not been entrusted to him. Closely related to the chorale cantatas are the chorale dialogues O Ewigkeit, du Donnerwort, No. 60, footnote, second composition in D major, solo cantata for alto, tenor, and bass for the 24th Sunday after Trinity, 1732, end of footnote, and Ach Gott, wie manches Herzeleid, No. 58, footnote, in C major, solo cantata for soprano and bass for the Sunday after New Year, 1733. In the Bachgesellschaft edition it is called the second composition, although that in A major is perhaps later. End of footnote. The first of these is concerned with fear and hope. Fear, alto, sings the chorale O Ewigkeit, du Donnerwort, O Eternity, thou awful word, the orchestra painting its trembling. Then we hear the consoling voice of hope, bass, reiterating incessantly, Herr, ich warte auf dein Heil, Lord, I wait for thy salvation. Both proceed along the road to death. O schwerer Gang zum letzten Kampf und Streite, O saddest way to the last combat. Mein letztes Lager will mich schrecken, I dread my last resting place, laments the despairing soul, the passionately agitated orchestra adding a motive that reminds us of Peter's aria of despair in the St. John Passion. Hope sings consolingly, Mich wird des Heilands Hand bedecken, the hand of Redeemer will protect me. At the finish we hear the voice of a Holy Ghost in a wonderful arioso, Selig sind die Toten, die in dem Herrn sterben von nun an. Blessed are the dead that die in the Lord from now henceforth. The cantata ends with Rudolf Ahle's beautiful hymn, Es ist genug, Herr, wenn es dir gefällt. Thy will, O Lord, be done. The other dialogue, Ach Gott, wie manches Herzeleid, No. 58, is constructed on similar lines. The opening duet, Ach Gott, wie manches Herzeleid begegnet mir zu dieser Zeit. Geduld, mein Herze, Geduld. Ah, Lord, how much sorrow of heart is now mine. Be patient, my heart, be patient. Reproduces the musical mood of Mein letztes Lager will mich schrecken. The marking of adagio must not tempt us to take the movement too slowly and too softly. The instrumental accompaniment must flame and glow with suppressed despair. Footnote: all movements of this kind must be played heavily. The duet in cantata No. 60, Mein letztes Lager will mich schrecken, again is usually taken in such a way that the music does not express terror at all. On the problem of these duets, please see chapter 23 of this volume. End of footnote. The final duet, on the other hand, cannot sound too joyful, notwithstanding the chorale Ich hab vor mir ein schwere Reis zu dir ins Himmelsparadies. I have a grievous journey before me to thee in paradise. The orchestra, in union with the voices, Nur getrost, getrost, ihr Herzen, hier ist Angst, dort Herrlichkeit. Be of good cheer, O hearts, here is anguish, there is glory, must dominate the lament. Note the animated steps of the basses, violas, and second violins hastening joyously to the Himmelsparadies, with the semi-quavers of the first violin streaming before them. If the idea of these two dialogues came from Picander, he did Bach's muse a great service. There is no mistaking the enthusiasm with which they have been written. The unusually large number of Bach's solo cantatas at this time is easily explained by the poor state of the St. Thomas choir at the beginning of the 30s. With the two chorale dialogues, we have 11 of these solo cantatas. 2 of them are soprano cantatas, Falsche Welt, dir trau ich nicht, number 52, for the 23rd Sunday after Trinity, and Jauchzet Gott in allen Landen, number 51, for the 15th Sunday after Trinity. The introduction to Falsche Welt, dir trau ich nicht, is taken from the first Brandenburg Concerto, Bach-Gesellschaft 19. The accompaniment to the first aria, Immerhin, wenn ich gleich verstoßen bin, ever when I am cast off, is very characteristic. It illustrates the word verstoßen in the most drastic style imaginable. In the joyous theme of a final aria, Ich halt es mit dem lieben Gott, die Welt mag nur alleine bleiben, my part is with my dear Lord, I need not the world, the music reminds us that it is the rejected one who has now found happiness in God. The cantata Jauchzet Gott in allen Landen, number 51, is a brilliant and spirited piece of coloratura for soprano and trumpet, the instrumental theme of a first aria being in this style. For the last aria, Bach uses the chorale Sei Lob und Preis mit Ehren, the Alleluia of which becomes a concerto for soprano and trumpet with orchestral accompaniment. All sopranos interested in Bach are recommended to practice this cantata daily. Its full effect, however, is obtainable only when it is sung by a clear boy's voice. Footnote: there exists another version of the text of this cantata, running thus: Jauchzet Gott in allen Landen, mit den Engeln lasst uns heut unserem Gott ein Loblied singen, which indicates that Bach at some time or other used this music for Michaelmas. End of footnote. The best known of the solo cantatas for alto is Schlage doch gewünschte Stunde, number 53. Strictly speaking, it is not a cantata, but a morning aria, as it is called on the title page of the old manuscript in which it has come down to us. As Bach employs 2 bells in this work, Forkel thinks that it does not belong to the period of his purified taste. The other alto cantata, Widerstehe doch der Sünde, number 54, footnote, the copy does not state for which Sunday this cantata was intended, end of footnote, begins with an alarming chord of the 7th. The trembling of the basses and violas and the sighs of the violins between them give the movement a somewhat disturbing effect. It is meant to depict the horror of the curse upon sin that is threatened in the text. Of a similar character is the aria Wer Sünde tut, der ist vom Teufel, the sinner is of the devil. It is a strict trio between the voice, the violas, and the violins. The theme runs thus. Harmonically, the movement is of unparalleled harshness. The opening aria of the solo cantata for tenor, Ich armer Mensch, ich Sündenknecht, number 55, is as a rule phrased so inanimately that the whole sense of a despairing wail is lost. The characteristic accent should fall on the second beat. The orchestra must phrase thus. This passage should be played with a strong crescendo, the last quaver being always heavily accented in contradiction to the beat, thus obstructing the rhythm, as it were. This motive belongs to the words Ich geh vor Gottes Angesicht mit Furcht und Zittern zum Gerichte. I go in fear and trembling into the presence of God. It suggests painful striving, as in the theme of the introduction to the cantata Herr, gehe nicht ins Gericht, number 105, of which it strongly reminds us. Finally, the motive should also be phrased in opposition to the natural beat, the accent falling on the uptake quaver after the rest. The movement is only properly played when every suggestion of the charming 6/8 rhythm is gone. The impression must be one of urgent unrest. In the opening aria of a solo cantata for bass, Ich will den Kreuzstab gerne tragen, number 56, footnote for the 19th Sunday after Trinity, end of footnote, it is doubtful whether we should accent thus, or thus.
Ich will den Kreuzstab.
The natural verbal accent indicates the latter. The first, however, is more characteristic, as it brings out the whole extent and all the severity of the ascending line by emphasizing the final syncopated note. Footnote. The distinction is of course only slight, as both the C sharp and the D are accented. The effect of a difference in accentuation between the orchestra and the singer is not displeasing. End of footnote. For the rest, the accompaniment is wholly formed of a motive of transfigured grief. Perhaps the number is generally taken in rather too slow a tempo, so destroying the contrast with the final Da leg ich den Kummer auf einmal ins Grab, then suddenly I lay my sorrow in the grave. The fine wave motive that accompanies the recitative arioso, Mein Wandel auf der Welt ist einer Schifffahrt gleich, my course on earth is like a voyage, does not make its full effect when given to a solo violoncello. It comes out calmly and clearly, as if a bassoon and a viola are added. In the tutti passages of the final aria, Endlich, endlich wird mein Joch, at last is my yoke, it is as well to add the violins to the oboe, so that the theme may give voice to all its ungovernable joy. This is one of the most splendid of Bach's works. It makes unparalleled demands, however, on the dramatic imagination of a singer who would depict convincingly this transition from the resigned expectation of death to the jubilant longing for death. The bass cantata for the purification of Mary, Ich habe genug, number 82, also has death for its theme. It depicts the heavenly homesickness of the old man who is already detached from all the things of this world. Inexpressible joy wells forth from a semiquaver passage with which the orchestra in the first aria accompanies the voice and the arabesques of the oboe. Then follows the glorious death lullaby, Schlummert ein, ihr matten Augen, fallet sanft und selig zu. Slumber now, weary eyes, close softly and happily. Here again, however, the last expression is that of ecstatic joy, that suddenly finds voice in the aria Ich freue mich auf meinem Tod, I rejoice in my death. Bach also transcribed this cantata for soprano, perhaps with a view to his wife singing it in their domestic concerts. He wrote the aria Schlummert ein in her Klavierbüchlein of 1725, only noting, however, the voice part in full. He would himself add a free accompaniment in performance. We have a typical specimen of Bach's system of musical illustration in the cantata Siehe, ich will Fischer aussenden, number 88. Footnote, Jeremiah 16, verse 16. Solo cantata for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass for the 5th Sunday after Trinity. It is also interesting to see that Bach accompanies the arioso Fürchte dich nicht, denn von nun an wirst du Menschen fangen. Fear not, for from henceforth shalt thou be fishers of men, with the joy motive. End of footnote. The orchestra accompanies the first half of the verse with flowing wave motives, as if to conjure up before the hearer the placidly heaving lake on which the fishers are embarking. At the words "Und danach will ich viel Jäger aussenden, die sollen sie fangen auf allen Bergen," and after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill, this accompaniment suddenly ceases, and the horns strike in with gay fanfares. One of the most perfect specimens of Bach's mood painting is to be seen in the accompaniment to the first aria of the cantata Was soll ich aus dir machen, Ephraim, No. 89. Footnote: solo cantata for alto, tenor, and bass for the 22nd Sunday after Trinity. End footnote. The text is founded on Hosea 11, verse 8, and runs thus: Was soll ich aus dir machen, Ephraim? Soll ich dich schützen, Israel? Soll ich nicht billig ein Adama aus dir machen und dich wie Zeboim zurichten? Aber mein Herz ist andern Sinnes, meine Barmherzigkeit ist zu brünstig. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? Mine heart is turned within me, my repentings are kindled together. Footnote: Admah and Zeboim were cities destroyed with Sodom. End of footnote. This text is reproduced by means of three themes. The first, in the bass, symbolizes the wrath of God. The oboes give out wails and sighs. The sorrowful question is put by the violins. As these motives intertwine and interpenetrate each other without coming to any conclusion, so God's heart is distracted by contradictory thoughts upon Israel. That the theme in the violins is meant to suggest the sorrowful question is proved by the first chorus of a cantata Ich elender Mensch, wer wird mich erlösen von dem Leibe dieses Todes, No. 48, where the orchestral accompaniment is constructed upon a theme that is almost identical with that of Was soll ich aus dir machen, Ephraim? The first chorus of the cantata Ich glaube, lieber Herr, hilf meinem Unglauben, No. 109, footnote for the 21st Sunday after Trinity, end of footnote, is a marvel of polyphonic declamation. The distressful anxiety of the words is most movingly expressed. The aria Wie zweifelhaftig ist mein Hoffen, wie wanket mein geängstigst Herz, how uncertain is my hope, how my anxious heart doth falter, is wholly taken up with a representation of someone walking uncertainly. For this purpose Bach employs the heavy rhythm. By means of which, in the aria Komm, süßes Kreuz, in the St. Matthew Passion, he depicts the man staggering under the weight of a cross. The cantata ends with the simply figured chorale Wer hofft in Gott, he whose hope is in God, the peculiar tense orchestral accompaniment to which is probably intended to symbolize the certainty of the hope. In the first chorus of a cantata Herr, deine Augen sehen nach dem Glauben, No. 102, footnote for the 10th Sunday after Trinity, end of footnote, Bach gives a particular characterization to each of the three sections of the text, so that the movement, apart from a final summary, is really composed of three choruses. Some idea of a splendid acerbity of this music may be had from the theme of the middle section, Du schlägest sie, aber sie fühlen nicht. Thou smitest them, but they feel it not. The bass aria, Verachtest du den Reichtum seiner Gnade, if thou dost scorn the riches of his grace, begins with the leap of a seventh.
Verachtest du?
The orchestral accompaniment of the first chorus of a cantata Es ist nichts Gesundes an meinem Leibe, und ist kein Friede in meinen Gebeinen, there is no soundness in my body, and no rest in my bones, Number 25, footnote for the 14th Sunday after Trinity, end of footnote, is constructed out of a series of sighs. While the trombones, cornets, and flutes play the chorale Ach Herr, mich armen Sünder, Lord, I, a wretched sinner, in 5 parts. The bass theme that accompanies the aria, Ach, wo hol ich, armer, Rat, Ah, where shall I, miserable one, find counsel, is interesting in that it reproduces exactly the same hurried and faltering steps as we have in the theme of the aria, Ach nun ist mein Jesus hin, in the St. Matthew Passion. The final aria, Öffne meinen schlechten Liedern, is dominated by a beautiful colloquy between the strings and oboes on the one side and the 3 flutes on the other. At a performance of this work, the recitative, in which Picander compares the world to a hospital, should be cut out. It goes beyond all endurable limits of tastelessness. Footnote: Die ganze Welt ist nur ein Hospital, wo Menschen von unzählbar großer Zahl und auch die Kinder in der Wiegen an Krankheit hart daniederliegen. Den einen quälet in der Brust ein hitzges Fieber böser Lust, der andere lieget krank an eigener Ehre hässlichem Gestank. Den dritten zerrt die Geldsucht ab und stürzt ihn vor der Zeit ins Grab. End of footnote. The 2 cantatas last mentioned, numbers 102 and 25, were performed by Emmanuel at Hamburg, after he had corrected his father's errors. His revisions have been preserved. They do not throw a very favourable light on the understanding of Bach by his sons. In this partly disfigured form, the cantata Herr, deine Augen sehen nach dem Glauben was printed for the first time in 1830. We shall probably never know how Bach could bring himself to turn the main chorus of this cantata into a Kyrie, the alto aria Weh der Seele into a Qui tollis, and the tenor aria Erschrecke doch into a Quoniam tu solus. Footnote: see the small masses in G minor and F major, Bach-Gesellschaft 8. End of footnote. More barbarous perversions cannot be imagined. The blue sky seems to hang over the Ascension cantata Wer da glaubet und getauft wird, number 37. It can easily be imagined how, in the final aria, Bach translates into musical motives the words Der Glaube schafft der Seele Flügel, dass sie sich in den Himmel schwingt. Faith gives the soul wings that it may soar to heaven. End of chapter 29, part 2.